Dr. Rachel Brennan's scalpel froze mid-incision. The surgical light caught something that didn't belong, a glint of metal buried deep in fibrous tissue. Her latex gloves trembled as she pulled back another layer of inflamed muscle. The operating room, normally humming with quiet efficiency, fell into suffocating silence. Only the heart monitor continued its relentless beeping, unnaturally loud against the stillness. She had performed hundreds of neck surgeries in 23 years. Cysts, tumors, abscesses, nothing surprised her anymore. Until now. "Clamp," she said, but her voice cracked. The surgical nurse passed the instrument with shaking hands. Dr. Benjamin Walsh, her resident, leaned closer. His breath quickened behind his mask. Embedded in Margaret Callahan's neck, surrounded by angry red tissue and decades of scar formation, was a fragment of brass metal, tarnished, corroded, but unmistakable. A police badge. Numbers etched into the surface. Number 2847. Rachel's stomach dropped. She knew that number, from 1998, from a case that was never solved. The patient beneath her had carried evidence inside her body for 26 years. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 6 months earlier, the town of Ashford, Vermont, lay blanketed in January snow. The kind of pristine white that made everything look peaceful, innocent, the kind that hid things beneath its surface. Margaret Callahan arrived at the public library before dawn, as she had for 40 years. At 68, her routine was sacred. Unlock the heavy oak doors at 5:45. Turn on the brass lamps one by one. Dust the shelves in the reading room while the rest of Ashford slept. She moved through the silence like a ghost, her navy turtleneck pulled high against her throat, her thin frame casting long shadows across rows of forgotten books. She touched her neck reflexively, a habit she'd developed over decades. The lump beneath her skin had been there so long it felt like part of her body now. Some mornings, she could almost forget it existed. Other mornings, like today, it throbbed with a dull ache that radiated down into her shoulder. In her kitchen at home, William's coffee mug still sat on the table where he'd left it 4 years ago. She couldn't bring herself to move it. The cancer had taken him slowly, mercifully at the end. In his final weeks, he'd held her hand and said things she still couldn't think about without crying. Things about forgiveness, about secrets that were too heavy to carry alone. She'd been alone since, truly alone, in a way she hadn't been even during their marriage, because William had known. At the very end, when morphine loosened his tongue and hers, she'd told him everything, and he'd looked at her with those fading blue eyes and whispered, "I wish you'd told me sooner. I would have protected you, but it was too late for protection, too late for anything except the truth between them before he slipped away." Her son Nathan called once a week from Boston, brief conversations filled with weather talk and work updates. He'd visited at Thanksgiving, stayed 2 awkward days, then fled back to his life of tech meetings and empty routines. She didn't blame him. How could she expect him to understand a mother who'd been emotionally absent most of his life? How could she explain that love and terror could occupy the same space in a woman's heart? Linda Foster, her neighbor of 35 years, was the only constant. Every Thursday, like clockwork, she appeared at Maggie's door with a casserole and concerned eyes. Linda noticed things. The way Maggie's turtlenecks grew tighter each season. The way she flinched at unexpected sounds, the way she never, ever left her neck exposed. This particular January morning, as Maggie arranged books in the biography section, she felt wetness against her collar. She touched the spot, and her fingers came away red. The collapse happened on a Saturday afternoon at Ashford General Store. Maggie had been reaching for a can of soup on the top shelf when the pain struck, sharp and sudden, like a knife twisting beneath her skin. Her vision blurred. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed to pulse and swim. She gripped the shelf for support, but her fingers wouldn't hold. The world tilted sideways. Betty Marshall, working the register, looked up at the sound of cans clattering to the floor. "Maggie, you all right, hun?" Maggie tried to speak, but no words came. She felt warmth spreading down her neck, soaking into her collar. Her carefully wrapped scarf loosened. When she touched the spot, her hand came away slick with blood. "Oh, Lord!" Betty rushed from behind the counter. "Maggie, you're bleeding." Other customers turned to stare. Mrs. Henderson from the post office. Young Travis Cooper buying cigarettes. The Johnson twins with their mother. All of them watching as dark red bloomed across navy blue fabric like a flower opening in terrible slow motion. Maggie's hands shook as she tried to retighten the scarf. She had to cover it, had to hide it before anyone saw too much, before anyone asked questions she couldn't answer. But her fingers fumbled uselessly at the fabric, and the blood kept coming. "Someone call 911. Betty's voice seemed to come from very far away. "No." Maggie found her voice at last. "No hospital, please. I'm fine. Just dizzy." "Fine. Honey, you're hemorrhaging." The room spun faster. Maggie took one step toward the door, then another. She had to get out, had to get home, had to. Her knees buckled. The linoleum rushed up to meet her. Someone screamed. Then everything went dark. She came to moments later with Betty's face hovering above hers and the wail of sirens approaching. 2 paramedics burst through the door, young men with kind eyes and professional efficiency. They knelt beside her with a stretcher and medical bags. "Ma'am, we need to take you to the hospital," the taller one said. "No." Maggie struggled to sit up. Panic flooded her system with adrenaline. "I'm fine. Just low blood sugar. I need to go home." "You're bleeding from your neck. That's not low blood sugar." "It's nothing. An old injury. It does this sometimes." The paramedics exchanged glances. The shorter one spoke gently. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this isn't nothing. You need medical attention." But Maggie was already pushing herself up, waving away their hands. Every instinct screamed at her to run. If they took her to the hospital, if doctors examined her, if they looked too closely at the mass in her neck. "I'm refusing transport," she said firmly, though her voice shook. "That's my right." Betty knelt beside her. "Maggie Callahan, don't be stubborn. You collapsed." "You're still bleeding." I said no. Maggie met her eyes with an intensity that made Betty recoil. "Please, just let me go home." The paramedics made her sign a form, refused medical treatment, against medical advice. Her signature wobbled across the page. They gave her gauze to press against her neck and watched with obvious reluctance as she stood on trembling legs and walked out into the cold January afternoon. The walk home took 20 minutes. Maggie kept her head down, one hand pressed to the gauze, the other clutching her coat closed. Blood seeped through the fabric anyway. She left a trail of dark drops in the snow. Inside her Victorian house, she locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Her reflection in the hallway mirror showed a ghost, pale, wild-eyed, blood-stained. She forced herself to climb the stairs to the bathroom, unwrapped the scarf with shaking hands, removed the soaked gauze. The lump had ruptured partially. Yellowish fluid mixed with blood oozed from a small opening. The smell made her gag, sharp, metallic, wrong. She cleaned it as best she could, wrapped it in fresh gauze from the medicine cabinet, and covered everything with a new scarf. Navy blue. Always navy blue. Then she went to William's chair in the den and sat in the dark, waiting for her hands to stop shaking. That night, Linda Foster called 3 times. Maggie didn't answer. Betty Marshall called twice. Maggie let it ring. Finally, at 11 p.m., her phone buzzed with a voicemail from a number she recognized instantly. Nathan. "Mom." His voice sounded tight with worry. "Linda called me. Said you collapsed at the store. With blood. What the hell is going on? Call me back. Tonight." Maggie listened to the message twice, then deleted it. She couldn't talk to him. Not yet. Not until she figured out what to do. But at 6 the next morning, she heard a key in the lock downstairs. Footsteps on the hardwood. Then Nathan's voice, careful but firm. "Mom, I'm here, and we need to talk." Nathan stood in the doorway of the den, still wearing his winter coat. His beard was overgrown, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion from the red-eye flight. He looked at his mother curled in William's old recliner, and something in his expression cracked. "Mom," Maggie straightened slowly, pulling her scarf tighter with instinctive defensiveness. "You didn't need to come. Linda said you collapsed, with blood everywhere, that you refused an ambulance." He stepped closer, his voice rising slightly. "What the hell, Mom?" "Language, Nathan. Don't." He held up a hand. "Don't deflect. Not this time." They stared at each other across the worn carpet. Outside, early morning light filtered through bare tree branches, casting skeletal shadows on the walls. The house smelled of old books and lemon furniture polish, and something underneath, something medicinal and faintly rotten that Nathan was only now noticing. "How long have you been hiding this?" he asked quietly. "Hiding what?" "Whatever's happening to you." He gestured toward her neck. "You're always wearing those scarves, even in summer, even inside. I thought it was just, I don't know, a style thing after Dad died. But it's not, is it?" Maggie's hands trembled in her lap. She clasped them together tightly. "It's nothing for you to worry about." People who have nothing to worry about don't collapse in grocery stores bleeding. Nathan pulled off his coat and sat on the ottoman facing her. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what's going on. And I cleared my schedule for the week, so I can wait as long as it takes." The silence stretched between them. Maggie could hear the old house settling, the furnace clicking on in the basement, the distant sound of a snowplow scraping down Maple Street. All the small sounds of ordinary life continuing while her own life teetered on the edge of exposure. "It started a long time ago," she said finally. "How long?" 26 years. Nathan's eyes widened. 26. Mom, that's when I was in high school. When Dad was still... He stopped. "What started 26 years ago?" Maggie reached up slowly and began unwinding the scarf. Her movements were deliberate, resigned. She'd known this moment would come eventually. Part of her was almost relieved. The fabric fell away. Nathan's reaction was visceral. He stood abruptly, turned away, then forced himself to look again. "Jesus Christ, Mom." The mass on her neck was the size of a small orange, grotesquely distorting the left side of her throat. The skin over it was discolored, purple and stretched too thin, with visible veins spiderwebbing across the surface. A small opening near the top oozed clear fluid mixed with blood. The smell, no longer hidden by fabric, filled the space between them. "How long has it been like this?" Nathan's voice was barely above a whisper. It was smaller before, much smaller, just a lump. "But over the years," she trailed off. "Years." He sat back down heavily. "You've had this for years and never saw a doctor?" "I couldn't." "Couldn't or wouldn't?" "Both." Maggie's voice was steady now, almost calm. The secret was out. The worst was happening. In some ways, it was easier than the endless anticipation. "I was scared." "Of doctors?" "Of what they'd find." Nathan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Mom, this could be cancer. It could be... God, it could be anything. You have to see someone. Today. Now. It's not cancer." "How do you know?" "Because I know what's in there." The words came out flat, factual. "And it's not a tumor." Nathan stared at her. "What does that mean?" Maggie stood and walked to the window. Snow had begun falling again, soft flakes that caught the morning light. She remembered another snowfall, decades ago, December 1998. Blood on white. Panic in the dark. "There was an incident," she said to the window. "In 1998, someone came to the house." "What kind of incident?" "A violent one. The air in the room changed." Nathan stood slowly. "Mom, what are you saying?" "I'm saying someone attacked me. And when I fought back, something happened. Something got embedded, and my body grew around it." Nathan's face went pale. "Embedded? Like what? Glass? Metal?" Maggie turned to face him. "I don't want to talk about the details. Not yet. But I need you to understand. I didn't go to a doctor because I couldn't explain how it happened. and I couldn't explain how it happened because—" She stopped, gathering courage. "Because the person who attacked me never left this property alive." The words hung in the air like smoke. Nathan sank back onto the ottoman. "You're saying someone died here? Someone attacked you and you—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I protected myself. That's all I'll say for now." "Where's Dad in this story? Did he know?" Maggie's eyes filled with tears. "Not for 22 years. I told him when he was dying, when the morphine made me brave enough to finally speak. He held my hand and said he wished I'd told him sooner, that he would have protected me. But Nathan—" Her voice broke. "How could I tell him? How could I tell anyone? A woman kills a man in her own home, even in self-defense, and everyone asks what she did to provoke it, what she was wearing, why she let him in. I would have lost everything. Lost you." Nathan put his head in his hands. Minutes passed. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "We're going to the hospital. Today." "Nathan." "No." His voice was firm. "Whatever happened, whatever you're afraid of, we deal with it together. You don't get to die alone protecting some secret from 1998. That's not how this ends." Maggie wrapped her arms around herself. "If they find it, if doctors see what's inside, they'll have questions, medical questions, legal questions. Then we'll answer them. Or we'll get a lawyer. But Mom—" He stood and took her hands. "This thing is killing you. I can smell the infection from here. You have maybe weeks, maybe less. So either you come with me willingly or I call an ambulance. Your choice." She looked at her son, her boy, now a man with graying temples and worry lines, and saw William in his face, the same stubborn determination, the same protective instinct. "There's a brass box," she said quietly, "in the basement, behind the furnace. If something happens to me during surgery, if I don't wake up, you need to read what's inside. You're going to wake up. Promise me you'll read it." Nathan squeezed her hands. "I promise. Now let's go." Dr. James Porter had been Ashford's family physician for 30 years. He'd delivered half the babies in town, treated everything from measles to heart attacks, and prided himself on knowing his patients' medical histories by heart. But when Margaret Callahan walked into his examination room that Tuesday morning with her son hovering protectively beside her, he knew immediately this was something beyond his small-town practice. "Margaret." He smiled warmly, though concern flickered in his eyes. "Nathan said this was urgent." "It is," Nathan spoke before his mother could deflect. "Show him, Mom." Maggie's hands moved to her scarf with visible reluctance. Dr. Porter maintained his professional calm as the fabric fell away, but his expression shifted, eyebrows drawing together, lips pressing into a thin line. "How long?" he asked simply. 26 years, give or take." He rolled his stool closer, snapping on latex gloves. "May I?" She nodded. His fingers were gentle as they palpated the mass, pressing carefully around its perimeter. Maggie winced, but stayed still. "There's significant infection, certainly. The skin is dangerously thin here." He pulled back, removed the gloves. "Margaret, I won't lecture you about why you should have come sooner. What I need to know now is, do you have any idea what caused this? Any trauma to the area?" Maggie's jaw tightened. "There was an incident. A long time ago." "What kind of incident?" "I'd rather not say." Dr. Porter glanced at Nathan, who gave a small nod that said, "She's told me something, but not everything." The doctor turned back to Maggie. "I need to be direct with you. This could be a severely infected cyst, but the location and your description of onset suggest possible foreign body encapsulation. Did something penetrate the skin during this incident? Possibly. Glass, wood, metal?" Maggie's silence was answer enough. "Doctor." Porter stood and moved to his computer. "I'm ordering blood work immediately. We need to check for systemic infection, white blood cell count, inflammatory markers, blood cultures, and I want imaging. Ultrasound first, then likely a CT scan." "What are you looking for?" Nathan asked. "Whatever's in there." He turned back to Maggie. "If there's a foreign object, your body has been fighting it for over 2 decades. That's an enormous burden on your immune system. The infection could spread to your bloodstream. It could affect the carotid artery, the nerves in your neck. Margaret, I'm not trying to scare you, but this is life-threatening." "I understand." "Do you?" His voice was kind but firm. "Because I think you've been living with this so long you've normalized it. But there's nothing normal about carrying an infected mass for 26 years. The blood work took 15 minutes. The ultrasound appointment was scheduled for that afternoon at Ashford Medical Center. Maggie sat in the dimly lit examination room while a technician moved a wand across her neck, gel cold against her skin. Nathan watched the monitor from the corner, unable to interpret the grainy black and white images, but sensing the technician's growing unease. "I need to get the radiologist," the technician said, her professional smile not quite reaching her eyes. Dr. Stephen Walsh appeared 10 minutes later, a man in his 40s with sharp eyes and careful hands. He studied the screen, adjusted settings, took measurements. His silence stretched uncomfortably. "Mrs. Callahan," he said finally, "there's definitely something solid at the center of this mass. The density suggests metal. I'm recommending a CT scan today. We need clearer visualization of what we're dealing with." The CT scan happened 2 hours later. Maggie lay perfectly still on the sliding table while the machine hummed and clicked around her. Nathan waited in the lobby, scrolling mindlessly through his phone, unable to focus on anything except the image of his mother's neck. Swollen, infected, hiding something that had been there since he was 16 years old. When Dr. Porter called them back to his office the next morning, his expression was grave. He pulled up images on his computer screen, cross-sections of Maggie's neck in various angles, the mass visible as a dark area surrounding something that glowed white and bright. "There," he pointed to the center. "That's metal, approximately 3 centimeters by 2 centimeters. Angular. It's surrounded by dense fibrous tissue, your body's attempt to wall it off. But the inflammation around it is extensive." Nathan leaned closer. "What kind of metal?" "Can't tell from imaging alone, but the shape." Dr. Porter zoomed in. "It's not random, not a fragment from an accident. This has defined edges, almost like—" He stopped. "Like what?" Maggie's voice was barely audible. "Like something manufactured, something that was whole before it became lodged in your tissue." The room fell silent except for the hum of the computer. Dr. Porter turned away from the screen. "Margaret, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be honest with me. Was this the result of violence? Were you assaulted?" Her hands clenched in her lap. "Yes." "Did you report it?" "No." "Why not?" She looked at Nathan, then back at the doctor. "Because I was afraid. Because the person who did this had power. Because I thought no one would believe me." Dr. Porter nodded slowly. "And the person who did this, where are they now?" "Gone." "Gone where?" Maggie's voice was steady, cold. "Just gone. That's all I can say." The doctor studied her face for a long moment. Then he picked up a business card from his desk. "This is Dr. Rachel Brennan at Regional Medical Center. She's the best head and neck surgeon in Vermont. I'm referring you to her immediately. This needs to come out, Margaret. Soon." "How soon?" Nathan asked. "Days, not weeks. The infection is advancing. Her white blood cell count is elevated. If it reaches her bloodstream—" He didn't finish the sentence. Maggie took the card with trembling fingers. The name looked official, final. Dr. Rachel Brennan, the person who would cut into her neck and discover what had been hidden there since December 1998. "There's something else you should know," Dr. Porter said quietly. When we remove foreign objects from assault victims, we're required to document them, photograph them, and depending on what we find, report them to authorities. Nathan stood abruptly. You're saying my mother could be investigated? I'm saying we have protocols. If the object is evidence of a crime, she was the victim of a crime. I understand that. But if someone else was harmed, in self-defense, Maggie interrupted. Everything I did was self-defense. I want that on record. Dr. Porter met her eyes. Then you need a lawyer, Margaret, before this surgery happens, because once that object is removed and catalogued, things will move quickly, and you need to be protected. They left the office in silence. In the parking lot, Nathan turned to his mother. Who was it, Mom? Who attacked you? Maggie stared across the snow-covered lot toward the mountains in the distance. His name was Daniel Hartwell. He was the police chief of Ashford, and on December 15th, 1998, he came to our house to kill me. The words hung in the frozen air between them. And you killed him instead, Nathan said softly. Yes. Where is he now? Maggie wrapped her scarf tighter and started walking toward the car. In the forest behind our house, where he's been for 26 years. The appointment with Dr. Rachel Brennan was scheduled for the following Tuesday at Regional Medical Center in Burlington. Nathan drove while Maggie sat in the passenger seat, watching Vermont countryside blur past the window. Bare trees, snow-covered fields, farmhouses with smoke curling from chimneys. Normal life continuing everywhere except inside her own body. They'd spent the weekend in careful avoidance. Nathan cooking meals she barely touched. Maggie sitting in William's chair, radio playing softly. Linda bringing casserole and asking too many questions with worried eyes. Neither mother nor son mentioned Daniel Hartwell's name again, though his ghost filled every silence between them. Nathan had wanted to call the police immediately. Maggie had stopped him with a hand on his arm and 2 words. Not yet. Mom, there's a body buried on our property. I know what's there. I've known for 26 years. A few more days won't matter. It matters legally. Every day we don't report. It is another day of what? Obstruction? I think we're past that point, don't you? She'd smiled sadly. Let me have the surgery first. Let them remove the evidence from my body. Then we'll deal with the rest. Now, pulling into the medical center parking lot, Nathan killed the engine and turned to her. Are you ready for this? No, but I haven't been ready for anything in 26 years. That hasn't stopped things from happening. The medical center was sleek and modern, glass walls, polished floors, abstract art on the walls designed to soothe anxiety. It didn't work. Maggie's heart hammered as they took the elevator to the 3rd-floor surgical wing. Dr. Rachel Brennan's office was tastefully appointed. Diplomas from Yale and Johns Hopkins lined one wall. Thank you cards from grateful patients covered a bulletin board. A photo on her desk showed a woman who looked like her with 2 teenage boys at a ski resort, all of them grinning. The doctor herself entered 5 minutes later, early 50s, gray-streaked brown hair pulled back efficiently, reading glasses perched on her nose, white coat crisp over blue scrubs. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine but professional. Mrs. Callahan, Nathan. She gestured to the chairs. I've reviewed your imaging from Dr. Porter. Let me be direct. This is one of the most unusual cases I've encountered in 23 years of practice. Unusual how? Nathan asked. Dr. Brennan pulled up the CT images on her computer screen. Foreign body encapsulation isn't uncommon. People carry shrapnel, glass fragments, even small objects for years. But the size of this object, the location and the timeline, she turned to Maggie. Dr. Porter noted you were assaulted. I need to understand the circumstances to plan the surgery properly. Was this a stabbing? A projectile injury? Maggie's mouth went dry. It was during a struggle. Something broke off and became embedded. What kind of something? Metal. From his uniform. Dr. Brennan's fingers paused on her keyboard. His uniform? He was a police officer. The room temperature seemed to drop. Dr. Brennan's professional mask slipped for just a moment, surprise, then careful neutrality. I see. And this officer, did he file charges against you? No. Why not? Maggie met her eyes steadily. Because he died that night, in my kitchen, while trying to kill me. Dr. Brennan sat back in her chair. Several seconds passed. Nathan could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Mrs. Callahan, the doctor said carefully, I need to be clear about something. When we remove foreign objects during surgery, particularly those that may be evidence of a crime, we have legal obligations. Hospital policy requires documentation. Depending on what we find, I may be required to contact authorities. I understand. Do you? Because once I remove this and photograph it and send it to pathology, you can't take it back. The truth becomes official. The truth has been living in my neck for 26 years, Dr. Brennan. I think it's time it saw daylight. The doctor studied her for a long moment. Then she turned back to the screen. The surgery will take approximately 5 to 6 hours. The object is embedded near the carotid artery and surrounded by severely inflamed tissue. There's risk of nerve damage, significant bleeding, infection complications. You'll need to be intubated under general anesthesia. Recovery will take weeks, possibly months. And if I don't do it, Maggie asked, then you'll die. The infection is already systemic. Your white blood cell count is dangerously elevated. I'd estimate you have 2 to 3 weeks before sepsis becomes likely. After that, she shook her head. Mrs. Callahan, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to save your life. Nathan reached for his mother's hand. When can you do the surgery? I can schedule it for this Friday. That gives us 3 days to get her infection under better control with IV antibiotics. She'll need to be admitted tomorrow for preoperative preparation. Maggie's voice was barely audible. This Friday, 3 days. I know it's fast, but given the circumstances, I don't think we have the luxury of time. What will you do with it? Maggie asked. After you remove it? Dr. Brennan's expression was compassionate but firm. I'll photograph it, document it, send it to pathology for analysis. And yes, I'll notify hospital administration of the unusual nature of the finding. What happens after that? She spread her hands. That's not my call. But Mrs. Callahan, I want you to know something. What? I believe you. I've worked with enough assault victims to recognize truth when I hear it. Whatever happened that night, you survived. And survival sometimes requires impossible choices. Tears welled in Maggie's eyes for the first time since entering the office. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to get through the surgery. Dr. Brennan stood and extended her hand again. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 6th floor, room 614. Bring whatever you need to be comfortable. And Mrs. Callahan, she paused, you might want to consider having a lawyer present when you wake up. In the elevator descending to the lobby, Nathan kept his arm around his mother's shoulders. We should call Martha Grayson. She's the best defense attorney in Vermont. I don't need a defense attorney. I need a miracle. Mom, I killed a man, Nathan, a decorated police officer. It doesn't matter that he was trying to kill me first. It doesn't matter that he was a predator who used his badge to terrorize women. All that will matter is that I buried his body and said nothing for 26 years. The elevator doors opened. They walked through the lobby, past families in waiting areas, past children coloring in activity books, past elderly couples holding hands. All these people with normal problems, normal lives. Outside, snow had started falling again. Nathan stopped on the sidewalk and turned his mother to face him. Listen to me. Whatever happens after Friday, we face it together. You're not alone anymore. You hear me? You're not alone. Maggie touched his face, seeing the boy he'd been and the man he'd become. I've been alone so long, I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn, starting now. That night, alone in her bedroom, while Nathan slept in his old room down the hall, Maggie took out a pen and paper. Her hand shook as she began to write. To whom it may concern. My name is Margaret Eleanor Callahan. On December 15th, 1998, I killed Police Chief Daniel Hartwell in self-defense. I buried his body in the forest behind my home at 247 Maple Street, Ashford, Vermont. What follows is the complete truth of what happened that night. She wrote for 3 hours, every detail, every moment, the months of harassment leading up to that night. The way Hartwell used his position to intimidate her, the things he said he would do if she told anyone, the sound of his boots on her porch, the smell of whiskey on his breath, the lamp in her hand, the blood on the kitchen floor. When she finished, she sealed the pages in an envelope and wrote Nathan's name on the front. Then she placed it in the brass box in the basement, next to the other letter she'd written years ago, the one she'd almost sent to William before losing her nerve. Friday was coming. The truth was coming. After 26 years of silence, Margaret Callahan was finally going to speak. Friday morning arrived, wrapped in darkness and cold. Maggie woke at 4 a.m. in her hospital room, already dressed in a surgical gown, IV port inserted in her left hand. Nathan slept in the chair beside her bed, his neck bent at an uncomfortable angle, still wearing yesterday's clothes. He'd refused to leave even when the nurses suggested he get proper rest. She watched him sleep and remembered the last time she'd watched him like this, 26 years ago, when he was 16 and still believed his mother was someone uncomplicated. Someone whose biggest secret was maybe a hidden birthday gift or a surprise party. Not a woman with a dead man buried in her backyard and a piece of his badge growing into her flesh like some grotesque reminder that the past never stays buried. A nurse entered quietly to check vitals. Blood pressure elevated. Heart rate fast, but steady. Temperature slightly elevated from the lingering infection despite 3 days of aggressive IV antibiotics. Nervous? The nurse asked kindly. Terrified, Maggie admitted. Dr. Brennan is the best. You're in good hands. But whose hands will I be in after, Maggie thought. When they see what's inside me, when they photograph it and catalog it and call the police. Nathan stirred and opened his eyes. Hey, you okay? No, but I will be. Dr. Brennan arrived at 5:30, already in surgical scrubs, her hair tucked under a cap. She pulled a chair close to Maggie's bed and spoke in that calm, steady voice that somehow made terrible things sound manageable. I'm going to walk you through what's going to happen. The anesthesiologist will be here soon. We'll wheel you down to the OR around 6. The surgery will take 5 to 6 hours, possibly longer if we encounter complications. We'll make an incision here. She traced a line along Maggie's neck. Remove the mass and the foreign object, clean the infected tissue, ensure we haven't damaged any major vessels or nerves, then close you up. You'll wake in recovery, probably around 2 p.m. Questions? What if you find something you weren't expecting? Maggie asked. Dr. Brennan met her eyes. Then we deal with it. But Mrs. Callahan, I want you to focus on one thing right now. Surviving this surgery. Everything else, all the legal complications, all the questions that will come after, those are problems for later. Right now, your only job is to wake up. Understand? Maggie nodded, throat too tight for words. I need to tell you something else. Dr. Brennan glanced at Nathan, then back to Maggie. I had a colleague in forensic pathology look at your imaging. Off the record, he confirmed what I suspected. The object's shape is consistent with a badge fragment, specifically the corner section where an ID number would be stamped. When I remove it, I'll be required to notify hospital security. They'll contact Vermont State Police. There will be a detective waiting when you wake up. Nathan stood abruptly. She just had major surgery. They can't interrogate her immediately. They won't interrogate. They'll take initial statements. But Nathan? Dr. Brennan's voice was gentle but firm. This is a homicide investigation. It's been a cold case for 26 years. Once we confirm what's in your mother's neck, everything accelerates. You need to be prepared for that. The anesthesiologist arrived. a soft-spoken man in his 40s who explained the process of intubation and sedation in terms that made it sound almost peaceful. You'll count backwards from 10. Most people don't make it past 7. At 5:55, they wheeled Maggie toward the operating room. Nathan walked beside the gurney, holding her hand until they reached the doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." "Mom," his voice cracked. "I love you. Whatever happens, I love you." "I know, sweetheart. I've always known." She squeezed his hand one last time. "The brass box. Remember the brass box." Then the doors swung open and she was gone, disappearing into fluorescent brightness and the smell of antiseptic and the murmur of surgical staff preparing for a procedure that would either save her life or destroy what remained of it. Nathan stood in the empty hallway for 5 full minutes before Linda Foster appeared, slightly out of breath, carrying 2 thermoses of coffee. "I couldn't let you wait alone," she said simply. They sat in the surgical waiting area among other families clutching coffee cups and staring at phones and counting minutes. Linda didn't ask questions. She just sat beside him, a solid presence in a world that had gone liquid and uncertain. Inside operating room 3, Maggie Callahan lay unconscious on the table while Dr. Rachel Brennan made the first incision. The scalpel, parted skin that had been stretched too thin for too long, blood welled up, was suctioned away. Beneath the surface, the mass revealed itself, angry, inflamed, fibrous tissue that had been fighting infection for over 2 decades. "More suction," Dr. Brennan murmured. Dr. Benjamin Walsh, her resident, leaned closer. "I've never seen encapsulation like this. The body really tried to wall it off. For 26 years. The immune response is remarkable, actually. That she survived this long is a miracle," Walsh finished. They worked in careful silence, dissecting through layers of scar tissue. An hour passed, 2. The mass was more vascularized than the imaging had suggested. Small vessels spiderwebbed through the fibrous tissue, bleeding when cut, requiring meticulous cauterization. At the 3-hour mark, Dr. Brennan's scalpel touched something that wasn't flesh. The metallic scrape made everyone in the room pause. "There it is," she said quietly. She switched to forceps, probing gently. The object was embedded deep, surrounded by a capsule of dense tissue. She worked it free carefully, millimeter by millimeter, aware that one wrong move could tear the carotid artery or damage the vagus nerve. "Coming out," she warned. With a final careful pull, the object released. She placed it in a sterile specimen tray and everyone leaned in to look. It was corroded, discolored by decades inside human tissue, but unmistakable. A fragment of brass badge, roughly 3 centimeters by 2 centimeters. One corner was jagged where it had broken off. The other showed partial numbers. 284. "My God," Walsh whispered. Dr. Brennan's hands were steady, but her voice was tight. "Tag and photograph. I want documentation of exact placement, tissue condition, everything, then seal it and call security." A surgical nurse took photos from multiple angles while another carefully placed the fragment in a sterile evidence container. The room's atmosphere had shifted from medical procedure to crime scene documentation. "Doctor," Walsh said, "there's something else." He pointed to the tissue cavity where the fragment had been. Nestled in the deepest recess was something small and dark. Dr. Brennan extracted it with micro-forceps. Fabric. A small piece of navy blue fabric, partially dissolved by bodily fluids, but still recognizable as part of a uniform shirt. The kind worn by Vermont State Police in the 1990s. "Document this too," Dr. Brennan said. Her mind was racing. Badge fragment, uniform fabric, 26 years of encapsulation. The story was writing itself in flesh and metal and time. She returned to the surgical field, removing infected tissue, irrigating with antibiotic solution, checking for nerve damage. The carotid artery was intact. The vagus nerve appeared undamaged. Against all odds, Maggie Callahan's body had protected its vital structures, while simultaneously preserving evidence of what had happened in her kitchen in December 1998. Beginning closure, Dr. Brennan announced. By 1:15 p.m., the incision was sutured. By 1:30, Maggie was being wheeled to recovery. By 1:45, hospital security had contacted Vermont State Police. Detective Sarah Hendricks was in her car heading to Regional Medical Center by 2 p.m., her mind already assembling pieces of a puzzle that had haunted her department for over 2 decades. Daniel Hartwell, badge number 2847, missing since December 15, 1998, last seen near Maple Street, near the Callahan residence. In the recovery room, Maggie's eyes fluttered open to bright lights and the soft beeping of monitors. Her throat was raw from intubation, her neck throbbed with deep bone-level pain, but the weight, that terrible weight she'd carried for 26 years, was gone. A nurse smiled down at her. "Welcome back, Mrs. Callahan. Surgery went well." Maggie tried to speak, but only a rasp emerged. The nurse held a cup with a straw to her lips. Cool water. Heaven. "Your son is here," the nurse said, "and there's a detective who needs to speak with you. Are you up for that?" Maggie closed her eyes. She'd known this moment was coming. Had known it since the day Nathan found her bleeding in the grocery store. Since the day Dr. Porter saw the CT scan. Since the moment 26 years ago when she felt Daniel Hartwell's badge fragment pierce her skin and made the conscious decision to tell no one. "Yes," she whispered, "I'm ready." Detective Sarah Hendricks was 38 years old and had spent the last decade working cold cases for Vermont State Police. She'd seen bodies pulled from lakes, bones unearthed from shallow graves, evidence that had waited years to tell its story. But she'd never seen anything quite like this, a woman who'd carried proof of a crime inside her own body for 26 years. She stood outside Maggie Callahan's recovery room reviewing the preliminary report. Badge fragment number 2847, confirmed match to Daniel Hartwell. Uniform fabric, consistent with Vermont State Police issue circa 1990s. Severe chronic infection. Patient claims self-defense during attempted assault. Hendricks had been 15 when Hartwell disappeared. She remembered the massive search, the news coverage, the way the whole town had turned out to look for their missing police chief. She also remembered whispers, rumors that nobody wanted to say out loud about Hartwell's behavior around women, complaints that disappeared, investigations that went nowhere. She knocked softly on the door and entered. Maggie was propped up in bed, neck heavily bandaged, looking small and fragile against white sheets. Nathan sat beside her, protective and tense. Linda Foster stood by the window, arms crossed. Dr. Brennan was present as well, positioned near the monitors like a guardian. "Mrs. Callahan," Hendricks showed her badge. "I'm Detective Sarah Hendricks. I need to ask you some questions about what happened in December 1998. "I know," Maggie's voice was hoarse. "I'm ready to tell the truth." Hendricks pulled out a digital recorder. "I'm going to record this. You have the right to have an attorney present. Do you understand that?" "Yes." "Do you want to wait for legal representation?" Maggie looked at Nathan, then back to the detective. "No. I've waited 26 years. I won't wait another minute." Hendricks pressed record and stated the date, time, location, and individuals present. Then she sat down and met Maggie's eyes. "Tell me about Daniel Hartwell." So Maggie told her everything. She told about the autumn of 1998, when she'd been volunteering at Town Hall, organizing old records, and had seen Hartwell in the parking lot accepting an envelope from Richard Pemberton, the land developer who wanted to build condos on protected wetlands. How Hartwell had turned and seen her watching, how his face had changed, from friendly police chief to something cold and dangerous. She told about the visits that followed. Hartwell stopping by the library on her shifts, standing too close, speaking in voices too quiet for others to hear. "I'd hate for anything to happen to William's pension. Paperwork gets lost sometimes. Benefits get delayed." "You understand what I'm saying, Margaret?" She told about the phone calls to her house when William was traveling for work. Heavy breathing, sometimes silence, sometimes Hartwell's voice, smooth and threatening. Just checking in, making sure you're safe. So many break-ins lately. Woman alone can't be too careful. She told about December 15th, 1998, William away on business in Boston. Snow falling, her locking all the doors at 9 p.m. and checking the windows twice. The sound of footsteps on her porch at 11:30. I thought if I didn't answer, he'd leave, Maggie said, tears streaming down her face. But he had a key. I don't know how he got a key, but he let himself in. He wasn't in uniform. He was drunk. He had a gun on his hip, but he didn't draw it. He said he didn't need it. Nathan's hand found hers. Linda was crying silently by the window. He told me I'd seen too much, that I was a liability. That he'd tried to scare me into silence, but I was too stupid to take the hint. He grabbed me by the throat and said, her voice broke. He said no one would miss a librarian, that my husband would get over it, that my son would forget me eventually. What did you do? Hendricks asked gently. There was a brass lamp on the entry table. My grandmother's lamp, heavy, solid. I grabbed it and I swung. I hit him in the head. He staggered back but didn't go down. His badge was hanging loose on his shirt. He'd been wearing it over civilian clothes like he wanted me to remember who he was, what power he had. We struggled. The lamp broke. He fell, hit his head on the corner of the kitchen counter. The room was silent except for monitor beeps and Maggie's ragged breathing. When I realized he was dead, I panicked. I knew no one would believe me. A town librarian against a decorated police chief. Who would I call? The police. He was the police. So I dragged him to the basement, then to the old root cellar foundation in the forest behind the house. I buried him there. It took me all night. And the badge fragment? Hendricks asked. It must have broken off during the fight. I felt pain in my neck, thought it was just a scratch. I cleaned myself up, wrapped a scarf around it. The next day, I reported him missing like everyone else. Said I'd heard sirens the night before but didn't see anything. They never suspected me. Why would they? I was just Margaret Callahan, the quiet librarian who baked cookies for book club. Hendricks stopped the recording. Mrs. Callahan, I need to verify your story. Can you tell me exactly where the remains are? Maggie described the location with precision that came from 26 years of remembering. The old root cellar, northeast corner of her property, marked by 3 birch trees in a triangle formation, approximately 40 yards from the back fence. We'll need to search your property. I know. This is now a homicide investigation. Even if your account of self-defense is accurate, you concealed a death, buried human remains, provided false information to investigators. There could be charges. Nathan stood abruptly. She was terrified. She was protecting herself and her family from a corrupt cop who was trying to kill her. I understand that. Hendricks' voice remained steady. But that doesn't change the law. Mrs. Callahan, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to find the truth. The truth is in that forest, Maggie said. It's been there waiting for someone to look. Hendricks left to coordinate the search team. Within 2 hours, K9 units and ground-penetrating radar equipment were deployed at 247 Maple Street. Within 4 hours, they'd located human remains exactly where Maggie said they'd be. By evening, the news had broken. Cold case breakthrough, missing police chief found after 26 years. TV trucks lined Maple Street. Reporters shouted questions. Neighbors stood in clusters, shocked, gossiping, arguing. Linda fielded phone calls while Nathan stayed at the hospital with Maggie. Dr. Brennan had restricted all non-police visitors, but she couldn't stop the media circus outside. At 8 p.m., Detective Hendricks returned with preliminary forensic results. She entered Maggie's room with an expression Nathan couldn't quite read. The remains have been positively identified as Daniel Hartwell through dental records. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with your account. But Mrs. Callahan, we found something else. Maggie's heart rate spiked on the monitor. We obtained a warrant to search Hartwell's personal effects that were stored in police archives. There was a locked footlocker that was never opened during the original investigation. Nobody thought to look in his personal belongings since he was presumed to be the victim of foul play, not the perpetrator. She pulled out a plastic evidence bag containing a small journal. This was inside. It's a log of sorts, names, dates, descriptions of encounters. Hendricks opened to a marked page. Margaret Callahan is listed December 10th, 1998. He wrote, "Problem needs permanent solution. Can't have witnesses. Friday night while husband travels." The room went silent. "He planned to kill you," Hendricks said quietly. "This journal proves premeditation on his part, which supports your claim of self-defense." Nathan sagged with relief, but Hendricks wasn't finished. "There are 6 other women's names in this journal, different years going back to 1994. Descriptions of harassment, assault, intimidation. Mrs. Callahan, you weren't his only victim. You were just the one who fought back." Maggie closed her eyes. "Who were they?" "I can't share details of an ongoing investigation, but I can tell you we're contacting each woman, building a case that shows Hartwell's pattern of behavior." Hendricks paused. "One of the names in that journal is Mary Hendricks, my mother. She died in 1997, suicide. I never knew why. The journal entry dated 2 weeks before her death says, MH becoming problem, too emotional, situation resolving itself." The detective's professional composure cracked slightly. "My mother killed herself because of what he did to her, and no one knew, no one protected her. So Mrs. Callahan, when I look at you, I don't see a murderer. I see someone who survived, who did what my mother couldn't." The district attorney's announcement came 3 weeks later. Maggie had been home for 10 days, recovering slowly. The surgical site was healing well. Dr. Brennan had removed the stitches and declared the procedure a complete success. Physically, Maggie was getting stronger. Emotionally, she existed in a strange limbo between relief and dread, waiting to learn if she'd spend her remaining years in prison. Martha Grayson, the defense attorney Nathan had hired, was cautiously optimistic. "The journal changes everything," she'd said during their consultation. "It establishes Hartwell's predatory pattern and his specific intent to harm you. Combined with your medical evidence and the testimony we're gathering from his other victims, we have a strong self-defense case." But self-defense didn't erase 26 years of concealment. Maggie had buried a body, misled investigators, lived with the secret while searches were conducted and a family grieved. Hartwell's elderly mother had died in 2003, still believing her son might be alive somewhere. His sister had spent a fortune on private investigators. The media coverage had been relentless. Some outlets painted Maggie as a hero. Librarian Stopp's serial predator. Others called her a murderer who'd evaded justice for decades. The town of Ashford was divided. Vigils were held both supporting and condemning her. The library where she'd worked for 40 years dedicated a bench to her, then removed it after backlash, then reinstated it after counter-backlash. Nathan had taken indefinite leave from his job and moved into his childhood home. He and Linda took turns fielding phone calls, turning away reporters, bringing Maggie meals she barely touched. The brass box from the basement sat on the kitchen table now, its contents read and reread. William's letter to Maggie had made Nathan cry. His father's words of love and forgiveness, his regret that he hadn't been there to protect her that December night. On a grey morning in early April, they gathered in the living room to watch the DA's press conference. Martha Grayson sat beside Maggie on the sofa. Nathan stood behind them, hands on his mother's shoulders. Linda had made coffee. Nobody drank. District Attorney Rebecca Morrison appeared on screen, standing at a podium with the Vermont State Seal behind her. Detective Hendricks stood to her left, along with the State Police Superintendent. After a thorough investigation into the death of former Ashford Police Chief Daniel Hartwell, Morrison began, we have reviewed all available evidence, interviewed multiple witnesses, and consulted with forensic experts and legal scholars. The evidence shows that on December 15, 1998, Daniel Hartwell entered the home of Margaret Callahan with intent to cause her serious bodily harm or death. Evidence recovered from Mr. Hartwell's personal effects indicates premeditation and a pattern of predatory behavior toward multiple women over several years. Maggie's hand found Nathan's and squeezed. Mrs. Callahan's account of self-defense is supported by physical evidence, medical documentation, and witness testimony establishing Mr. Hartwell's threatening behavior in the weeks preceding the incident. While Mrs. Callahan's decision to conceal Mr. Hartwell's death and remains for 26 years represents serious judgment errors that complicated the investigation, we find that prosecuting her would not serve the interests of justice. Nathan exhaled sharply. Martha Grayson smiled. Therefore, we are declining to file criminal charges against Margaret Callahan. However, this investigation has revealed systematic failures in our law enforcement oversight that allowed Daniel Hartwell to abuse his position for years. We are announcing a comprehensive review of cold cases and complaints involving Hartwell, as well as new protocols for reporting and investigating allegations against law enforcement personnel. Morrison's expression softened. To the women who suffered at Daniel Hartwell's hands, I am profoundly sorry that the system failed to protect you. To Mrs. Callahan, who carried physical and psychological trauma for 26 years, you are free. The television cut to reporters shouting questions, but Nathan had already turned it off. The room was silent except for Maggie's quiet sobbing. Not tears of sadness, tears of release, of a burden finally lifted. It's over, Martha said gently. You're free, Margaret. But Maggie shook her head. It's not over. Not yet. 2 days later, Ashford Town Hall hosted a community gathering that Maggie herself had requested. Detective Hendricks had located 6 of the 7 women named in Hartwell's journal. 6 women who'd lived for years thinking they were alone in their suffering, believing nobody would understand or believe them. The hall was packed, standing room only. Media had been barred. This was for survivors, for family, for healing. Maggie stood at the podium, still thin and pale, a silk scarf covering her surgical scar, not hiding anymore, just protecting healing skin. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the microphone. My name is Margaret Callahan. For 26 years, I lived with a secret that poisoned everything good in my life. It damaged my marriage, my relationship with my son, my ability to exist in the world without fear. I told myself I was protecting my family by staying silent, but silence doesn't protect anyone. It only protects predators. She looked out at the faces in the crowd, Nathan in the front row beside Linda, Martha Grayson standing in the back, Dr. Brennan, who'd driven from Burlington, and in the second row, 6 women of varying ages, united by shared trauma. I'm not a hero. I'm someone who survived, who made choices out of fear and desperation, who carried guilt and shame for decades because I thought I deserved it. But I've learned something important. Survival is not the same as living. For 26 years I survived. Now I want to live. She gestured to the women in the second row. These women are why I'm standing here today. They suffered because Daniel Hartwell believed his badge made him untouchable, because systems failed to protect them, because speaking up felt more dangerous than staying silent. Susan Crawford stood first, a woman in her early 60s with gray hair and fierce eyes. My name is Susan Crawford. Daniel Hartwell assaulted me in 1995. I reported it. I was told I must have misunderstood his intentions, that I should be grateful the police chief took an interest in my case. I wasn't grateful. I was terrorized. Another woman rose. Jennifer Walsh, 1997. He pulled me over for speeding, said he could make the ticket disappear if I was nice to him. I was 19 years old. I didn't know what to do, so I moved to New Hampshire and never came back. Until now. One by one they stood. They spoke. They named what had happened to them in rooms and cars and dark corners where Hartwell thought no one would ever know. The last to stand was Detective Sarah Hendricks. My name is Sarah Hendricks. Mary Hendricks was my mother. She died by suicide in 1997 when I was 15. I spent 20 years thinking she abandoned me, thinking I wasn't enough reason for her to stay alive. Then I read Daniel Hartwell's journal. I learned that my mother didn't leave me because she was weak. She left because a man with power destroyed her sense of safety, of worth, of hope, and nobody stopped him. Her voice broke, but she continued. Margaret Callahan stopped him. She did what the system should have done years earlier. She protected herself, and whether she knew it or not, she protected every woman who came after. So when people ask me if I think she's a criminal, I say no. I think she's a survivor who was failed by everyone who should have protected her. The hall erupted in applause. Not polite civic applause, raw, emotional, cathartic applause. People stood. Some cried. Maggie stood at the podium, tears streaming, finally understanding that she wasn't alone, had never been alone, just silenced. After the gathering, a memorial was unveiled in the town square. 7 candles in glass holders, each engraved with a name: Susan Crawford, Jennifer Walsh, Rebecca Martinez, Catherine O'Brien, Diane Hoffman, Sarah Patterson, and Mary Hendricks, the 7 women whose voices Hartwell had tried to silence. An 8th candle bore no name, just an inscription. For those still silent, your voice matters. That evening, Maggie and Nathan sat on the back porch of the house on Maple Street. The forest where Hartwell had been buried for 26 years was visible in the distance. Police had excavated the remains, restored the ground, but Maggie could still see the exact spot, would always see it. "Do you think Dad would be proud?" Nathan asked. Maggie thought of William's letter, his final gift to her. "My dearest Maggie, you saved yourself when I wasn't there. I'm proud beyond words." "Yes," she said simply. "I think he'd be proud of both of us." "What will you do now?" "Live. Really live." She touched her neck, where the scar was healing. "I spent 26 years afraid of what people would think if they knew the truth. Now they know, and I'm still here." Still standing. That's something. Linda appeared at the back door with a casserole. "Thursday delivery," she announced. "And this time you're eating it, Margaret Callahan. All of it." Maggie laughed, really laughed, for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Yes, ma'am." 3 months later, Maggie returned to volunteer at the Ashford Public Library, not as head librarian. Those days were behind her. But helping with Children's Reading Hour, organizing book donations, doing the quiet work she'd always loved. A young woman approached her one afternoon, hesitant, nervous. "Mrs. Callahan, I saw your speech at the town hall. I have a story too, something that happened to me, and I don't know who to tell." Maggie took her hand. "Then, let's make sure you're heard." They sat in the reading room among shelves of books while the young woman spoke. And when she finished, Maggie gave her Detective Hendricks's card and a phone number for a crisis counselor, and most importantly, belief. "Your voice matters," Maggie said firmly. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." That night, Nathan found his mother in the kitchen making tea. The brass box sat on the table, finally empty of secrets. William's photo hung on the wall again, facing forward this time. "I'm thinking of staying," Nathan said. "In Vermont. Maybe getting a place in town." "You don't have to do that for me." "I'm not. I'm doing it for me. Turns out running from things doesn't make them go away. You taught me that." Maggie smiled. Better late than never. They sat together in comfortable silence, drinking tea while spring rain pattered against windows. Outside, the forest was dark, but inside, for the first time in 26 years, everything was light. The body keeps the score, doctors say. Maggie's body had kept evidence, kept trauma, kept secrets sealed in flesh and scar tissue. But bodies also heal, and with healing comes the possibility of something she'd thought lost forever. Peace. She touched her neck where the scar was fading. Not gone. Never gone. But softer now. A reminder not of shame, but of survival, of truth finally spoken, of freedom earned through terrible cost, but freedom nonetheless. "Welcome home, Mom," Nathan said quietly. And for the first time since December 15th, 1998, Margaret Callahan felt like she finally was. Margaret Callahan's story reminds us that the weight we carry isn't always visible, but it's always real. For 26 years, she survived in silence, believing that speaking her truth would destroy everything she loved. But here's what she learned, and what we all need to hear. Silence doesn't protect us, it imprisons us. The scars we hide, the secrets we bury, the pain we endure alone, these don't make us weak. They make us human, and the moment we find the courage to speak, to share, to let others see our wounds, that's when real healing begins. Margaret's body kept the evidence when her voice couldn't. But when she finally spoke, she discovered something profound. She wasn't alone. She never had been. There were others who understood, who'd suffered, who needed to hear that survival is possible. If you're carrying something heavy today, a regret, a secret, a pain you think no one would understand, know this: your voice matters, your story matters, and speaking your truth, even decades late, can set you free. What burden have you been carrying that you're finally ready to release? Have you ever found healing by breaking a long silence? Share your thoughts below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.